alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and this is episode 102, so season 2, episode 2 of the podcast. And with me today is a returning guest, a book reviewer, Alicia Smock. Alicia Smock, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tim. Great to be back on the show. And no worries, I've been called Schmock before a lot.
Oh, well, I mean, I cannot believe I mixed it up. I can say tougher names than that. Come on.
No, you're fine.
So you run a review site. Can you tell people about that and how you read so much, I guess?
Yes. So my blog that I post my reviews on is called Rollout Reviews. I've actually been writing book reviews for about 4.5 years. I started shortly after I graduated college because I've loved reading ever since I was a little kid. And I just thought, hey, I read so many books. Why not just start writing reviews about them? Where I originally posted my reviews, it was actually for an online magazine, newspaper sort of thing called Examiner. They actually went under about 2 years ago. And that's when my blog, which I had been thinking about for a long time, actually came up. I had a connection that got me to someone who created my website. And now Rollout Reviews is up. And for any Transformer fan out there, they will know what rollout means because that's where I got my name from.
Okay. I was kind of curious, but Transformer and Rollout.
Yeah, I'm a big Transformer fan. Optimus Prime is my favorite character. I always love it when he says Autobots transform and roll out. So I'm like, hey, Rollout Reviews, that sounds kind of fun. And just a little Transformer hints in there too.
Okay, so that's our first wildcard question. So you like Transformers. Mm-hmm. Do you like other mechs at all?
So, another what?
Mecha, giant robots, the piloted kinds yeah. Usually. You enjoy those?
Definitely. Oh, yes, for sure.
Okay, good. Yeah, I actually wrote a mecha short story last year, and and I did publish it, but it was not very. It's just so small. I'm like, I wanted to do more, and I'm like, I just don't have time. I'm so bad at time. And it was space mechs fighting around a space station kind of thing.
Oh, that sounds great.
Anyway, it was it's still out there. I forget. I don't no need to pimp now. The show is young still. So mm-hmm. So as far as your reading goes, what kind of books do you review on the site?
Well, to be completely honest, I actually review pretty much every genre under the sun. My go-to is probably more fantasy, but I've been branching out. I've reviewed fantasy, sci-fi, suspense thriller. I've even branched out to horror, and I've done memoirs and historical fiction and romance and every other genre you could probably think of.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I'm glad to hear that because honestly, I guess it might make it more difficult in some ways to reach a specific audience with your reviews. It's cool that to talk to somebody who actually reads a whole ton of different genres. So that's great.
Oh, yeah. And I actually thought that it would be more difficult reaching out to that many different types of authors, too. But actually, it's not as difficult as I thought it would be because one person, I'll review a book for one author, and then that author will share the review, which will lead to a friend of theirs who's an author for a completely different genre. And then they'll reach out to me going, hey, would you be willing to read this genre for my book? And so I'm like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, we authors do stick together. I mean, I cannot tell you what percentage of my Facebook friends are actually authors as well. There's so many authors. Yeah, it's just so funny. It's like back before I started publishing and when I really got into the writing game as an adult, I was like, well, I don't know any other writers. And now it's like, well, most of the people I know are writers.
Right. But I mean, you could probably vouch for this too. It's like the writing community is such an amazing, supportive community, no matter what you write, whether it's books, reviews, or even if you just blog about books. Everyone is so supportive of everyone else. It's an amazing community.
Yeah, I could say, I think mostly yes. I've run into some bad eggs, but you stick around long enough, you're bound to.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is a handful of those. I will admit to that because I've met those too, but probably 95%.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I mean, though I will go back to one point where I would encourage people. I don't want to discourage teen writers. I think being a teenage writer was a great decision on my part.
Mhm.
And writing from, the age of 14 onward, I don't want to say that was a bad thing, but I'd say don't go on writer forums if you're that old.
Okay.
Just do the work, write your stories, give it to your friends. I just don't. I mean, I just think, at least when I was that age, people were really dismissive about people who wrote about teenagers who were writing fiction, no matter what they were trying to write. And
I think it's
that's
an excellent age to start at, and then you can just strengthen your writing from there.
no, absolutely. I'd say you'd rather, if you're going to publish stuff at that age, go to Wattpad. Wattpad's a great site for that, I'm pretty sure, or similar sites. And but Wattpad's that's designed for teenagers. You're going to find people like your age to read this. But anyway, that's my aside on teenage writers.
Well, I know for me, I started on fanfiction.net, so.
Oh yeah, Wattpad's basically similar. I think it's just a little more polished, and you can get paid if you actually get popular enough.
Oh, that's nice. And you could probably branch out to your own original ideas rather than sticking with like a movie or video game.
Absolutely. See, they do all sorts of stuff, and it's not all kids on there. In fact, there's a lot of great adult writers on there too. But it is mostly aimed at kids, younger readers.
Yeah.
And it's free. So, what else can you ask for?
Even better.
Anyway, as far as it goes, I mean, how long have you been reading, I guess? I mean, and obviously you say you're writing your reviews for a certain period of time, but you must have been reading books for a lot longer, right?
Yeah, definitely reading books since, I don't even know, the age that's coming to my mind is 3.
Okay. Since you could, basically.
Yeah, so I was one of those people, like, how nowadays in school, kids get in trouble for looking down at their laps and texting under their desks. I was the one who got in trouble because I would be reading under my desk because I just didn't want to learn the lesson, and I would just take my book out from under my desk and just start reading, and then they would call on me and it was like, sorry.
It's a little harder to hide. You can't even hide the book. It's a book,
it's a lot
not
bigger
phone.
than a phone.
Yeah. Geez. Actually, it reminds me. There are 2 things, but mostly it's just. But actually, let me just stick with one of them. There were these big little books, I think is what they were called back when I was a kid. I had a few of these. We had a few of these. There was one was for the Three Musketeers, another one was for the War of the Worlds, and
Nice.
they were tiny little books. They're like this. I mean, look in my hand now. Like when I was a kid, they were big, but they seemed big. They were thick, but the pages were small. They were and they had little pictures in them, illustrations. And they were told pretty much the complete story of these classic books, but they were but retold for kids basically, but not in like a dumbed down way. It was just like, well, we edited this to take out some of the boring stuff, probably.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, gosh, Three Musketeers, I mean, they kind of went on tangents. We're like, let's talk about this building here and what it signified and how it was built. Oh, and now we're going to go back to the story. And it's
yeah, Alexander Dumas is, I mean, he was living basically at the same time period. His father was practically one of the Three Musketeers.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I also have noticed that with a lot of the French writers. So, like, even Victor Hugo, I read his Hunchback of Notre Dame. He would go on tangents where it's like, let's talk about the architecture in 17 something. I don't even remember what year it was, and then go back to the story. It's like, I want to know more about the story.
So basically, French writers from back then, from the Age of Revolutions onward, at least at that point, they were very engaged. I haven't actually read a whole lot of Hugo or Dumas full work, but it's just so. I mean, I actually did read this book. It was called The Red and the Black. Red and the Black. I forget who it was by. It wasn't either of them.
Okay.
And it was basically about this. I read it a while ago. It was part of a book binge where I tried to read 7 books in 7 days. I did okay. Nice. I did 5 books.
Nice.
But this one, and this was one of the most difficult ones because it's translated from French. It's quite old. And it was about this guy who wanted to become a priest, I think, and he wanted to be in the military. He was this guy who wants to he wants to join the army and become an officer or whatever, and he ended up having to become a priest instead. I think that's how it worked.
Oh,
and that's the two things: is the red is the military and the black is the priesthood, because that's the 2 ways you could get power back then. And it's actually quite a perverse story in some ways, if I recall, but it's weird, and it's almost like two of the same book sequentially.
Okay.
That's the weird thing. It's like the same book happens twice with the same character. He just goes somewhere else and we start over in the middle.
Oh, so you kind of like follow both of his paths, like if he had chosen this or if he had chosen
No. That would be really cool. What happens is he
Oh.
chooses a path, then he has to leave the area he was, and he goes somewhere else, and he basically starts over there as living there, and then he does the same sort of. He gets in the same sort of trouble. He has the same sort of problems as he did in his old life, which is actually pretty deep as a theme, but it's a weird way to write a book.
Okay, I gotcha.
Like it worked. It made the theme pretty good. It did really work for this book as far as getting across the author was trying to convey, but I don't think it was that much fun in that second half.
Gotcha.
Anyway, it was otherwise not bad. It was one book plus the same book again.
Yeah.
That's how I felt anyway. I don't want to bash it. It's a classic, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, enough about that. As far as I guess, what sort of books you've been reading recently that whether they make it on your review site or not?
Well, every book I read actually ends up making its way onto my site. I know I've been playing catch up this year. The end of last year wasn't so great for me, so now I'm just playing catch up, catching up on a lot of books that I was reading last year, new books I'm reading this year, and just catching up on those reviews. I've had a lot of different genres that I've been reading. I know I'm actually even editing a book for an author friend of mine who's been writing a series of sci-fi cyborg books. And
oh yeah, love cyborgs.
So it's like, and it's actually really good. And I'm just about finished editing his first one, and then once I'm done with that, he wants me to edit his second one. And those are pretty cool. His first book, the author, his name is Andrew Wales, and he's done his first book is called Neosol Maelstrom. And he's actually written his book before, but this is a rewrite of his first book because he wasn't a big fan of his first one. So he's like, I want to redo some stuff and let's do this over again.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And then another book actually goes along the lines of what I thought that Red and Black was about, because there's a book that I had just finished called Between Two Doors. And I unfortunately can't remember her last name. Her first name is Taya, but she wrote a book and it focuses a lot on just like depression and losing your way, but then you're split between going down two different paths. And she actually shows both paths and like what would happen if the character took this path or if the character took that path, and does two completely different stories in one. And it was incredible to read.
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah, it sounds. See, like that, like I said when I was talking about Red and the Black, that sounds like a better book, or at least a more interesting, more entertaining one. I gotta say.
Yeah, no, it's nice because like she would alternate between chapters. So once you read one chapter, that's one life. You get to the next chapter, that's the next life, and then the chapter after that, that's the previous life. So you always know which life you're in.
Yeah.
And like the character always comes across complications in both. So it's like, okay, one may seem like the right choice, but maybe it's not the choice that you would have thought it would be.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I wonder how a book like that ends, but don't spoil it. That's awesome, though.
The ending actually made me mad and made me want the next book that doesn't come out till April.
Oh, okay. Mad in a good way or a bad way if you want the next book?
In a good way. One of those you read that last sentence and you're like, really? Come on. So kind of like that cliffhanger ending almost.
The cliffhanger.
So the one that you're only mad because you can't get your hands on the next book yet.
Oh yes. I just don't have that problem a lot because I mostly go, at least not lately, because I go back and I'm reading older books that are, the whole series is out, or just a lot of the books have been out for a long time, so there's a ton to read before I have to worry about running out of stuff.
Yeah, no, those books are nice because then you can just keep going on to the next one.
And even the books I've had for a while, like I got this book that I've been reading recently. It's The Warded Man by Peter V. Brett. Okay,
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's epic fantasy. It's a big fantasy series. There's 5 books in it, but when I picked the book up, I think there were only 3. But it took so long to actually get around to reading it. Then now there's 5, and the series is complete. I'm pretty sure. So once I can actually, yeah, exactly. So, well, okay. Turns out delay was good on that one. I mean, good-ish anyway. I'm sure the author was like, no, you're supposed to read them as they come out. Well, I mean, Sorry. It's a little late now.
But see, that's kind of nice, though. I was like that with the Witcher series. I found the third book, hadn't read it, so then I started over from the first prequel book, and then by the time I finally got to the third book, the fourth book was coming out, and then I was like, okay, that works out pretty well.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. So, yeah, as far as actually, that's this is the two books I've been reading lately. One of them was The Warded Man, and the other one is Casino Royale by Ian Fleming, the first James Bond first James Bond novel. So that's the one the movie was inspired by, or based on. I'm not sure which yet. It's pretty close so far, except for the fact that there was not so much with the murder immediately in the book and killing a guy. But I mean, obviously, movies you got to change it a little bit, and the book is old. It's an older pulp novel, so I mean, it's not as old as Red and the Black. Let's be fair here. But it's like a 50s book, and it's really well written. Actually, I got to say, especially because this was Ian Fleming's first ever novel. I'm kind of impressed. Yeah, he's got some passive voice stuff going on, but as far as nuts and bolts, he's just really engaging. I mean, yeah, when it gets beyond, and that's the thing. Do you ever notice the nuts and bolts when you're actually reading? I mean, not being a fiction writer.
Oh yeah, so you mean kind of like the little details and stuff in there?
Well, I mean, like the mechanics of what they're doing and what like when I read a book, I notice what people are doing that I wouldn't do. Like, oh, that's it seems wrong to me, to put it bluntly. When somebody's like, he says you used the word was the only verb in this paragraph. I'm like, ooh, that makes me feel bad. But that's just as a writer, right? Does that kind of thing affect you at all?
In all honesty, it does, only because also when I'm reading, my reading mind is in there, but then also my editing mind is in there. And also sometimes the little writing mind that's trying to come out, she comes out too. So it's like I have three minds reading this one book. And so it's like I catch a lot of different things. I've even had authors tell me, they're just, after I've posted a review, they're just like, wow, you got what I was trying to say. And that's because it's like, I always guarantee authors, I'm like, I read your books from cover to cover. It's like, I don't skim. I don't believe in that. I read every single word. And that's why I'm a little bit slower too, because I just like to take my time and read. And there are even times where I can tell when writers are having fun with their words. And so sometimes I'll even find sentences where I'll go back and reread the sentence aloud again, because it just it just flows and sounds so beautiful how they worded it.
Oh yeah, that's so good to hear. Actually, that's really gratifying to hear that there's people out there who do read like that. I mean, at all, because frankly, I sometimes feel like it doesn't matter if I'm writing well or if I'm writing kind of mediocre. Like if I'm not doing super well with the actual words, it doesn't matter. It's kind of still my take on it, because I know there's a lot of books on there that are like, the vast majority of people I think are less or they don't care a super huge amount about the individual words or the sentence level stuff.
Yeah,
they just want the story, right? Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the impression I get from a lot.
Yeah, I agree with you too, especially in today's society. It's like you notice articles or even newspaper articles. It's like a lot of them, they're just getting shorter and shorter because just no one wants to read anymore. They skim. They'll read what they want to read, and then they'll just be like, oh, okay, I'm done. And I even remember writing for a newspaper for a short time. They would tell me, they were like, okay, make sure to put the really important information in the first 2 paragraphs. If you have any more paragraphs after that, make them short, sweet, to the point, just kind of dribble. Like, no one's really going to get that far anyway.
Oh yeah. It's kind of too bad. But
I know it is.
Yeah, but going in the opposite direction from shorter articles to longer works of prose, I was wondering, I mean, because I've been I'm kind of revving up to write an epic fantasy book right now. I think that's our high fantasy is kind of the other way to put it. Okay. And I was wondering, because I think the most salient detail for that every epic fantasy needs is big scope, large, world spanning or at least nation spanning kind of events and stakes. And I'm curious, as a reader, how do you see stakes like that when you actually read a book? Because you probably read much more closely than me.
So you just mean like what What, like, captures my attention? Or
Yeah. What makes you what's a good way? What are the ways you kind of feel I don't know if feel is a good way to put it, but what are the ways you notice when a story is going bigger, like increasing in stakes, maybe, for starters?
I think I know for me personally, I love detail. I love when writers get really in depth into maybe not necessarily politics, because politics have a tendency to confuse me, but like just details about the different world building. So like maybe different creatures in the world. So I'm thinking more, I guess, like for the fantasy aspect, because I read
Sure.
more bigger worlds like that. But I guess just like, or how magic is created or kept alive in that world, or how the characters are a part of something bigger than themselves. So for me, it's like if a story moves too fast, then it kind of bums me out, because I'm one of those. I'm like, well, why didn't you explain this more? I'm like, I was interested about that person, or it's like, how did this person get their magical abilities? So for me, I guess it's just more of putting in those little details. I know people don't like to read details, but if you just mention like even like a special kind of flower that's growing, then but like in later on in the book, it can possibly bring a person back to life. It's like those tiny little details are what really capture my attention.
Okay, so little stuff that leads to bigger stuff, kind of thing.
Yeah, but like
Okay.
also it's like one of those, you need that healthy balance of detail, where it's like you want to be detailed, but you don't want to be overly detailed. Because I know I've even come across writers like that. I read a writer, he took 2 pages to describe a crack in a wall.
Yeah, unless a monster's going to come out of there, we don't need to know that, probably.
Yeah, and it's just like, okay, all right, wait, we're done with the crack. It's like we know the entire history of this crack. I want to go on with the story.
Oh boy, yeah, no names here. But anyway, that sounds like an interesting choice at any rate, if not an interesting thing to read.
Yeah.
And it is one of those things. Like when I'm actually writing a book, I'm like, I feel like I don't make a lot of conscious choices, but I definitely make a lot of decisions. That's one of the things I find challenging about writing books, actually, is kind of decision fatigue, because I write pretty much by the seat of my pants. I don't plan that much in advance.
Okay.
And
but sometimes that's the best way to write. And so many writers, they don't do anything because they're just like, oh, well, what if no one likes this? It's like, oh, I may hold off on this. It's like, if you just go out and you just write, then you're going to get your work out there, and you're going to get your work done, which is more than you can say for a lot of other people out there.
Yeah, well, of course, even a lot of people who write by the seat of their pants, like, say, George R.R. Martin, don't get the book done.
Yeah, everyone's still waiting for that one.
Yeah, well, those two. Yeah. Who knows how many will still be waiting after this season of television is over.
Well, I've heard a lot of people think that he's going to die before he can even finish it.
It's too bad. I wish him the best of health. Let me just put it that way.
Yes, definitely.
For sure, the best of health to George Martin. But yeah. Anyway, I really do think that if I'm writing, I agree with you. Actually, if I write whatever comes to my head, kind of thing, that's kind of what I rely on to get. I mean, because it usually fits together pretty well these days. I mean, I've had a lot of experience writing fiction, so it kind of makes sense that by now I can trust myself. It's been a decade and a half at least. And the beginning's shrouded in the mist of time, at least for me. I mean, it's not that long ago for some people, but there you go. It's just one of those things. Like, okay, I've been working at this for so long. Maybe I should trust myself more. Actually, that's the kind of thing that I think I'd say that's another piece of advice to a lot of writers out there, because I fell off that wagon for a while. That's why it's so difficult for me. After I was an English major and I was a freelance writer, I'm like, this kind of just sucks. I feel bad about everything I do. That was probably the number one thing that still slows me down.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think a lot of people, they suffer with that. I know people keep telling me, they're like, you should write a book. And it's like, well, I have ideas, but my mind keeps telling me, it's like, no, you shouldn't write that. No, don't do it.
Oh, yeah. Well, then that advice applies to you, too. I mean, I think writing can be as easy. It's as hard as you make it, which unfortunately is usually pretty difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And and it can be as simple as anything. I mean, obviously, when you're trying to create a particular effect, this is kind of the thing. I think there was an old Ira Glass video about this, the NPR host. He did a YouTube video or a podcast or something about this, and I've listened to it, where he talks about how you need to use you need your taste. Like when you start out and you're making art, any kind of art, you have good taste. That's why you want to make art, because you have an idea of what you want to make, but you don't have the skill to make it yet. And that's the thing that writers all artists just gotta roll with that. If you ask me.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's excellent advice.
And you've just got, anyway, that's just me on my high horse, because having a ton of experience now, at least by some standards again, is pretty. It's a pretty good place to be, and yep. I like the stuff I write now. That's the thing I can say for it. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much other people are always going to like it, but I like it.
Well, what's most important is that you like it. I mean, gosh, if you don't like what you write, then what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, I know some people still say writing's tough, like pulling teeth. It's some very good writers I've heard say that. It makes me kind of nervous, I'm like, what if I kind of did end up that way for a while, so that's why it makes me nervous, probably.
Oh, well, I mean, and what's kind of cool about writing is, like, even though they shove so many rules down our throats, it's like, oh, you need to do this, don't do that, do this, do not that. It's like, I've heard so many different things from so many different writers. I've talked to a writer, it took him 3 months to write his first book, and he just cranks them out within like 3 months at a time. I talked to another writer, it took him 12 years to publish his one and only work. So it's like, there's no time limit. It's just like what works for you.
Exactly. There's a mix of Stephen King's and Harper Lee's out there in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Though I do think more writers can benefit from writing more books, but sometimes you just don't have that in you. Some people just don't want to write that many books, or don't have the.
People are like, they're happy with one and done. They're like, hey,
exactly,
book, I'm good.
Yeah, it's their bucket list item,
Yeah, exactly. It's like, all right, next item, let's go.
I've got a long list here. Yeah. So as far we talked a bunch about reading, but as the end of the show closes in, I want to ask you what are some recent recommendations you could give people before you just tell us where they can find you online.
All right. Oh boy. If I have to narrow down recommendations,
just give us top 3, maybe whatever. It's a ballpark, 3 or 4.
Okay, well, let's go with, how about, oh boy, I'm like trying to look through books real quick here.
Oh, don't worry. That's completely understandable. And with somebody who reads as many books as you do, I don't feel like you need to rank them. That's for sure.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll stick with some of the most recent books I've read.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I would definitely recommend. So I guess my first recommendation would be actually a series of 3. It's by Jason Lavelle. He wrote a Dark Knight thriller trilogy, and they're more like historical fiction / thriller suspense / horror, but they're actually very well written. The story is very well executed, and they're all, without giving away spoilers, they're all based on true events.
Interesting. Okay.
When you're reading through them, it makes it even creepier, and stupid me decided to read them at 10 o'clock at night. So I'm staying up until 4 in the morning watching animated movies, trying to make myself feel better.
Oh, bad ideas. Yes. Reading horror at night.
No, not good. But that's my only option because I have a day job.
That's like, is it one? That's like that Calvin Hobbes. Of my limited options, this was probably the worst.
Yeah.
This is the only one I had, though.
Right.
Anyway. Yeah.
I guess my second one would be actually one I just finished. It's a longer book, but it moves really fast. It's called Fix by Michael Golbach. And it's kind of it's almost like a redemption story, a darker sort of drug dealing sort of story, but it's just finding yourself at rock bottom and just getting yourself out of that and making your way out of that and living your life to the fullest in a life that you never thought imaginable. But that one was really good.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, inspirational.
Very inspirational, very dark, that's for sure. So
yeah, but it's one of those things. Yeah, I guess maybe not inspirational then. Who knows? Well, I haven't read it. You're the one who actually read it, so you would know.
Well, it definitely becomes inspirational, that's for sure.
Okay.
And then a last one. Ooh, let's see. I guess the last one would probably be one I mentioned earlier, where it was the Between Two Doors. Let me actually get the author's name here for you. Let's open this document up. Taya. Oh, I hope I don't butcher her name. Taya De Vera, and that was that book about like you find yourself just pretty much falling into a slump, falling into a depression. You feel like your life's not going anywhere, and then you're pretty much given a choice: go down one path or go down the other path. And this author, she explores both paths, and one seems like, oh well, obviously this is the right choice, but then it turns out that the seemingly obvious choice isn't always the better choice. And
Awesome.
both paths have their share of problems, but they also have their share of good times too. But I guess those would probably be my 3 most recent recommendations.
Great. Thanks for being on the show. Let me, Alicia, where can people find rollout reviews and all that stuff? You know, all your other stuff, if you have anything else out there.
Oh yeah, well, basically it's just rollout reviews now. But if you go to rolloutreviews.com, it takes you directly to my blog page where you'll find every single review I've written so far, and then every review I'll post up later. You can find. I do have a rollout reviews page on Facebook, and you should be able to find that also through my main page on there, just Alicia Smock. Finding me on Twitter, I am on there too. Just do Alicia_C_Smock. And I believe, other than that, those are the main ways you can find me.
Well, awesome. Thanks for being on the show once again. It's been fun.
Yes, thank you for having me again, Tim.
Great. And as for this show, you can find us at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can find my books at Amazon.com, except for Stormfleet. Well, now you can still find Stormfleet there, but now that it's free, you can find it anywhere fine ebooks are sold, and it's, again, free. So please, everyone, go check that out. Stormfleet, book 1 of the Pillar Universe series, and thank you for listening. Talk to you next week.
That tears it.